Thank you, Lynn. What a delight to be with you this morning and sharing your faith promise. And Addie and I have been the recipients of your giving for many, many years, 45 years in the Amazon crew. And I see some kids here this morning. I'm going to tell them a quick story, if that's okay. And then Addie and we'll have that DVD after the story. Is that okay? All right, thank you. Well, I brought with me a picture of two of my favorite pets. Do you kids have any pets at home, honey? What do you have?
I have 2 snakes, 2 birds, 4 cats, and 2 dogs.
You got a zoo. How about you guys? Got any pets at home? I bet you never had a pet like the ones that we had, because living in the Amazon, we had interesting animals. Our kids were always bringing some exotic animal to the house, and then we'd have to take care of them. But our favorite of all is this guy right here. Oh my. Mischievous, ornery. Well, you see, we were down in the Amazon, sleeping in an Indian village in a bamboo thatched roof hut. And one day our son came to us holding in his hand this little fuzzball. I looked at this future tree swinger and I said, "Son, you cannot have this. Dad, please, I want this animal. Please, can I have it?" "All right, you can have this little baby." You see, the Indians had killed and eaten the mother. And so this little baby had nowhere to go. I said, "All right, you can have it, but you're going to have to take good care of it." So he gave it to his sister. And she fed this little animal with a teaspoon of sugared water, sugared milk. The animal rode on her head, her shoulders, slept in her bed, thought she was a person, lived in our home, tore it to pieces. When she got about this tall, I said, "No longer in the house with you, outside." We called her Smokey. Smokey the Bandit. Smokey is a woolly monkey. Now, the woolly monkeys are some of the most beautiful in the rainforest. We have the spider monkey. They have the long arms and legs, and they're the trapeze artists. And if your mom and dad really love you, honey, they'll get you one of these, okay? And the woolies are extremely intelligent and mischievous. And so we forbid her to live in the house because she tore it up. So Smokey lived outside underneath the roof eaves where she ate bugs and grasshoppers and anything that moved. She loved sweets. My wife spoiled Smokey, and she thought she was one of us. And so anytime my wife made cookies or bread, Smokey went nuts. Her favorite food of all time, homemade bread. You see, where we live, boys and girls, in the jungle, there were no stores. So every Saturday, my wife made this wonderful hot bread rolls. And she had put them on the table to cool with butter dripping down the side. And Smokey could smell that bread a quarter of a mile away. And there comes Smokey swinging across the tree lines. Oh, she comes across the clothesline, lands on the front porch, looks in the screen door, sees the bread on the table, knowing that she's not allowed inside. But she notices that the door is not hooked. So she looks at the screen, makes sure that no one can see her, and she opens the door with her paw, sticks her head in, makes sure that she's not spotted, slides across the floor on her belly, closing the door with her long tail. And then lickety-split to the table, she grabs that bread and heads for the door. Me right behind her. Smokey, put that bread back. You crazy monkey. Out the door she runs, looking back at me, down that short sidewalk, climbs that steep hill where I cannot get to her. She turns and sits on her haunches, munching her bread, looking at me as if to say, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" Well, are we smarter than monkeys? I hope so. So next Saturday, I was ready. The bread was on the table. I took off my belt, and I hung it right on a little bar at the screen door. And I thought, "Monkey, if you come today, you're going to get a good lesson." Sure enough, I looked out the window and I saw Smokey. She could smell that bread. Hand over hand on the clothesline, plumped down on the front porch. I acted like I didn't see her, but I watched her from the corner of my eye. Up to the door she came, made sure no one was looking, opened the door with her paw, stuck her head and slid across the floor, and ran to that table like a bolt of lightning, grabbed that bread and sprinting for the door. But, of course, I'm smarter than Monkey. I got there first. I reached up and I grabbed that belt, and as she was leaving, I swatted her right across her rump. Have you ever seen a monkey cry? They formed their mouth and, oh, she screamed and yelled and rubbed her bottom, went out the door, turned around and fussed at me, wandered off into the jungle madder than a wet hornet. Now, the monkey, you've learned your lesson today. Until next Saturday, bread is on the table. Sure enough, I saw her coming again. I saw, Monkey, if you come in that house today, I'm going to give you one you'll not forget. Have you ever heard that? Sure enough, I watched her from the corner of my eye. Up to the door she came, thought no one was looking, opened the door, stuck her head and slid across the floor, closed it quietly with her long tail, and bolted for that table, grabbed the bread, and I thought, you've had it. You have had it. We got to the door at the same time. I reached up to grab that belt just as her tail flashed past my hand, and her tail grabbed that belt, and she ran out the door, pulling my belt along behind her all the way down that sidewalk until she came to the hill where she dropped the belt, climbed up that hill, turned and sat on her haunches, munching her bread, looking at me as if to say, now what? Well, kids, pray for us because, listen, it's a jungle out there, I'm telling you. Well, I think we have just a 1-minute DVD. Would you flip that on for me, please? And then after that, my wife and I are going to greet you in the tongue of our people, the way that two old men do. Isn't that a pretty picture? It comes up right after that. It has a long lead on, I'm sorry. Well, looks like it's not going to make it. Daddy, come on up.
There.
Got it?
Oh, here he is now, Larry.
Quickest trip you ever make to the Amazon. And Nanny and I are going to greet you in the tongue of our people called the Alguaruna Indians, the native indigenous people of the rainforest in the northern jungles of Peru. And when two old men get together, they greet each other in a very powerful way. Now, when we were 12 years of age, a boy is expected to learn all the culture of his people. He sits around the fire at night, and his grandfather tells him all the legendary history, the genealogies, the war songs. And he's also taught to take a hallucinating drug called ayahuasca, made from the extract of a vine. And he's required at 12 years of age to go deep in the jungle by himself and spend 1 week. He must find his own food. He cannot return home. And at night he will tie his hammock between two trees. And he will take this hallucinating drug, ayahuasca, and he will have visions flood his mind. He can't even stand. He has to lie in his hammock. And the greatest vision that he can receive is to become a powerful warrior to fight with a heavy palmwood spear. And the second vision that every boy wants to obtain, a powerful hunter with the use of the blowgun to provide food for his table. And the third vision that every young boy wants to captivate is a powerful, authoritative speaker. So I'm going to visit this old man. I haven't seen him for a long time. And when we get together, we practice our culture. We both have a weapon in our hand. I'm traveling a trail. I'm at his hut. And he sees me. He grabs his weapon. And we now greet each other. I, being the stranger, must initiate the greeting. One, two, choo, 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 choo. 你看，往后不是给，去去去去去，去去去去，往后不是给，一出，哎呦，去去去去，一出，我们，你看，去，Yummy nama. Yummy nama betul. Ayo, wita. Abu yang bakti. Wita. Ayo, itu yummy itu. Abu yang bakti. This old man got it. Now, when they greet each other, they always, between phrases, spit on the ground because in that culture, you do not swallow your saliva. It's considered a nasty bodily waste. Consequently, the greatest spitters in the world. And into that culture, we found ourselves way back 53 years ago. And what a journey it has been. How many been on a work and witness team? Work and witness trip? That was one we saw on the screen in the village of Lista. And you know where Lista is located? It's mentioned in the Bible in Acts 1:8. And ye shall receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and be my witnesses. And Jesus mentioned 4 places: Jerusalem, all Judea, Samaria, and Lista. Remember? He really said uttermost, but that's where Lista is. And could I take you this morning by your mind's eye to the uttermost? Aren't you glad for our mission of the Church of the Nazarene that believes in taking the gospel even to the most hidden, isolated, remote people of the world? We've gone to villages, my wife and I, where the natives would come up and touch us to see if we were like them, for they had never seen anyone of our skin coloring in their life. What an incredible experience. Trails we walked. We traveled on untold numbers of rivers. Do you know that Work and Witness has built on 24 rivers of the Amazon churches? I'm glad I belong to a church like that. Now, my wife and I were sitting in our little home that overlooked the Marañón River, headwaters to the mighty Amazon. You know the Amazon is formed by 2,000 rivers. 11 of those are larger than our great Mississippi. And we lived on the corner of 2 rivers, the Marañón and the Cusú. At nighttime, I would fire up our little generator to give us electricity from 6 until 10. At 10 o'clock, I would turn off that motor, and it would be dark outside. You could hear the sounds of the jungle coming alive, the predators looking for their prey in the canopy overhead. You can hear 1,000 frogs croaking in the background. You can hear the rushing of the river crashing across the rocks down below. And that night, as we sit in our little living room, we heard from somewhere off in the distance this familiar cry, "How-cha!" the death cry. I said to my wife, someone is probably very sick. I could hear the women off in a great distance crying that familiar chant. I knew someone was desperately ill. They're probably, I said to my wife, coming across the trail from the village of Chipe, about a half an hour upriver from us by boat. And then I could hear that call coming louder. My wife and I went over to the screen window. We looked outside, could see only that inky blackness. We could hear the rushing of the river down below us. And then I could hear that cry coming closer. How-cha, the sing-song cry of death. And then I heard the splash of paddles in water and realized they were not coming by trail, but risking their very lives, for you do not travel the river at night. It's too treacherous. There are whirlpools, there are cross currents. And in a dugout canoe, that is very, very difficult. But they were coming by water. Someone is desperately sick. So I grabbed my large flashlight. I went outside. I shone its beam down to our mud port. I saw this long-sleeved black dugout canoe nosing into the soft mud. A man leaped from that canoe, plunged his cane pole into the dirt, and tied the trailing vine that held the canoe steady. Along beside it came another canoe, filled with women who were beating their chests, pulling their hair, and crying the death cry. I then watched as the men lifted from the bottom of that canoe on a bamboo mat an individual, and they began carrying that person up towards our clinic. I made my way quickly to the clinic. I opened up the door. I stood aside as they ushered this bamboo mat through the doorway. The women were crying along behind this individual. I automatically shone my light into the face. Why, it was Susanna. Not Susanna, I thought. She was in an obvious coma, white as a sheet. Her breathing was shallow. Susanna was in a desperate condition. I wondered what has happened to her. She was a young mother of about 21 years of age. She had 3 children, and she did live in the village across the river from Chipe. And as they were placing her on my examining table, my mind went back across the years. For I had known, my wife and I had known Susanna when she was just a little girl of about 6 years of age. She was one precious little girl, because she would come to the clinic every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with her father, because he suffered from a very serious tropical disease that I mentioned to the folk in the Sunday school class this morning, called leishmaniasis. Now, when men are out hunting at night or fishing, on some of the sandbars, in an area where this particular nocturnal sandfly is present, they might be bitten on some exposed part of their body. It begins as a large, ulcerative, seeping lesion. It will not heal. That lesion becomes greatly exaggerated, terrible, terrible condition. And when you see that, you know right away that it's leishmaniasis. It requires upwards of 100 injections just to arrest the disease. So her father would come 3 times a week for his injections. And Susanna would come with him. She would stand by her daddy as he would receive those very devastating injections, the very toxic medicine. And then hand in hand, they would walk back to their dugout canoe. Susanna would sit in the back of the canoe with a small paddle in her tiny hands, and she would steer the canoe as her father would balance himself on the front of the canoe, plunging that 12-foot cane pole into the bottom of the river, plunging the canoe forward. And I would watch them disappear around the bend on their way home. One Sunday, my wife announced to the whole church. You see, people came from 3 different villages on Sunday morning. Our dirt floor church was filled to overflowing every Sunday. It was an incredible sight. And she announced one Sunday, this next week we're going to have a vacation Bible school. And everybody said, well, what's a vacation Bible school? I never heard of one of those. She said, you come, you're going to see. And so the next day, our parking lot was filled with dugout canoes. They came across the trail. They came by every means possible. our church was packed to the overflowing. There were just about as many adults there as there were kids. For they had never heard of a vacation Bible school. And so Addie had made some papers of David and Goliath. She had painted one in with crayons. And then she handed those papers out to the kids, and the adults wanted them as well. And they held the crayons and they wondered, what are these for? They had never seen a crayon in their life. She said, take these colors and paint it just like the one that I have here on the wall. And so they knelt down in the dirt with their papers on the back of this bench, and they began to color those in, and just about as many adults were on their knees as well. And then she taught them some courses. She gave them a Bible story using the blackboard. And on Friday that week, she gave an altar call. And among the people who were kneeling at the altar was little 6-year-old Susanna. She gave her heart to the Lord. And it wasn't long, because of the compassionate ministry of her daddy receiving those weekly injections, that he and his wife likewise came to the Savior. And now the entire family came to the Lord. And they would come on Sunday to the little church on the Kusu River. And then it wasn't long until the church in their village was started, and now they would just cross the river and attend there every time the doors were opened. And I drew my attention back to Susanna that night. Her breathing was so shallow. She was in this deep coma. I wondered what has happened. I said, what happened to Susanna? They said, Doctor, she took Barbasco. Not Barbasco, I thought. You see, Barbasco is what we use in the jungle to fish with. Now, if you're an indigenous native, you love to fish. Better yet, to eat them. Fish is the principal part of their diet, along with wild game. Have you ever eaten armadillo? Tender white pieces of flesh cooked in a salt broth. Delicious food. Try it sometime. Have you ever eaten caper? Wild hog, wild pig? Oh my, some of the foods of the jungle are absolutely unbelievable. And you saw some of the grubworms in the picture. Oh, those, you toast them on a little skewer, and they are wonderful, kind of like shrimp. But Barbasco is used to fish with. Now, near every village there's a stream of water. And during the drier season, in this stream there's a huge pool of deep water, and the fish migrate to this cooler water. And the whole village waits with a bated breath for the headman to give the signal for the fishing day. And finally he says, tomorrow is the fishing day. And it buzzes on the lips of everybody. It splashes over into other villages. And the next day, hundreds of people line the banks of that stream, anticipating a great harvest of fish. It's one of the most exciting things I've ever witnessed in my life. Now, the morning of the fishing day, the women go to their gardens with huge baskets strapped to their back. They have their machete. They go to their gardens and they dig up this root plant called Barbasco. They fill the baskets. They carry these heavy loads across the trail to the fishing hole. And the men now receive these baskets. They swim out into this deep part of the water. They climb up on the boulders and they begin beating these roots against the rocks. And a white substance oozes out into the water. When basketfuls are thoroughly beaten to a pulp, the water takes on this chalky white appearance. And now the stage is set. Women are standing on the bank with machetes poised. Little boys are there with their king spears. Girls are standing by the many baskets to be filled. Men are peering into the depths of that deep water hole, standing on the boulders, waiting for the first signs of those fish that emerge out of the depths of that deep hole, because Barbasco affects their gill apparatus, so they don't receive oxygen. So the fish begin to surface looking for oxygen. And when they see the first fish coming up from the depths, the shout is given. 5 hours of bedlam breaks loose. Women splash into the water, striking fish with their machete, grabbing them and throwing them on the bank. The boys gig them with their spears, rip them off and toss them ashore, and the girls are lining the baskets as fast as they can. Then the men dive into that deep water hole. They're looking for the katachama sucker-like fish. Now these katachama, they attach themselves to the boulders underneath with strong suckers. And the men will rip them loose, bite their heads to stun them, and toss them ashore. And it is 5 hours, the most glorious fishing you have ever witnessed. And there's not a fish left. And now, automatically, everybody turns and makes their way downstream about 100 yards away. Because early that morning, every man built a 2-foot wide trap, one attached to another, all the way across the width of that stream. And the fish that escaped greedy hands upriver land in the traps downriver. And they harvest from those traps all the fish. And that night, under 100 fires, natives gorged themselves on fish. But Barbasco has another use. You see, it was a world of great fear and superstition, where witchcraft abounded, where revenge killings were practiced, where men were extremely dominant and women subservient. And many times when a man would scold his wife, she would go to the gardens and dig up that same root used for fishing and take that alkaloid poison and find her in a deep coma. I had treated untold numbers of attempted suicides. Susana, they said, had taken Barbasco. I thought, no. She was such a wonderful Christian lady. And then my mind flashed back to when she was 12 years of age. Beautiful young girl. And her father finally succumbed to that ravaging disease. It took his life, leaving Susana's mother with many children, of which she was not capable of caring for. So she decided in an arranged marriage to give Susana away to a young man in the village of Chipe by the name of Walter Catan. He was about 19, Susana 12. Walter cared nothing for the church, would never darken the door of the church. In fact, he drank with his buddies on a nightly basis. They would get drunk drinking that native beer called Masato. Are you familiar with yucca? That's a staple of our diet in the jungle. It is a root plant. Tubers. You cultivate them and you harvest them by pulling them out of the ground, and you boil them, and that's your staple food every day. To make beer, which is the work of the women, several women will join together and they will chew this boiled yucca, masticating it well, mixing it with their saliva. Inside their hut, they have a great big 5-gallon clay pot they've made, and they chew and spit for hours until the pot is gradually filled. Then they cut down a fresh green banana leaf, cover that, tie a vine around to hold it in place, and let that ferment for 3 days and nights. And there's nothing in canyon country that will come close to it. And now the men are ready for an all-nighter, maybe a 2-nighter. And they will come into the hut where the masato has been made. The ladies will dip a gourd that has little holes in it like this one down into that pre-digested, now fermented masato, and the men begin to drink it. And 2 or 3 bowlfuls, they get excited. They grab their spear. They begin to dance, hey, 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 in the wee hours of the night. And Walter, Susana's husband, that was his lifestyle. He cared nothing for church, but Susana continued crossing the river every day, Sunday, to the little Nazarene church in the village of Chipe. And along came 1, 2, and now 3 children. And she faithfully brought her kids to church every service. And I wondered, why? What happened to Susanna today? She's such a wonderful Christian mother. What could have happened? And then I remembered, just a few short months ago, Walter came home one day toting a new bride, introducing his new bride to Susanna and the children. He began to dote on the new bride. Anytime he killed a wild animal, he gave it to the new bride as opposed to Susanna and her children. But that was culture. Susanna had to accept it. But it was devastating. She had to double her workload just to make ends meet, to take care of her children. And his neglect continued for some time. And so I asked him, I said, but what triggered this today? I had done everything I could for Susanna. I had treated her for barbasco poisoning. And we waited. And as we waited, I asked, but why today? This has been on for some time. Why would Susanna today decide to take her life? So one of the men who had brought Susanna to the clinic, he said, Doctor, her husband went hunting this morning. He went hunting, of course, with his favorite weapon, the blowgun. Any man worth his salt has a good blowgun. This is a short one. Most are 10 to 12 feet long. They're effective up in the canopy of the rainforest, up to 40 yards. They are skilled with this blowgun. And they always carry with them a quiver full of poisonous darts that are tipped into a plant extract very similar to curare, which when it goes into the flesh of an animal, it paralyzes that animal. And favorite food of all, Smokey's mom. They invited my wife and I to a special meal. We were honored guests. How wonderful. They put us to the front of the line. They brought out these big old pots. One was filled with yucca boiled. We love yucca. One was filled with green boiled bananas. The other was a great big pot of frothy, bubbly soup. And we wondered what would be in the pot. For you've seen everything in the pot, believe me. And the man took this skewer and began to stir that soup around. And we saw some dark object emerging from the depths of that pot. And it rolled over, and we looked into the open eyes of a huge howler monkey's head. The mouth was open, the tongue was hanging out. Some of the hair hadn't been completely singed from the face. My wife nearly passed out on the spot, our first experience with monkey. And he shoved that head to one side, it sunk down in the bottom of the pot. He fished around and came up with the arm, the hand, and the finger with the hair still on the knuckles, and flipped that into my wife's bowl. I thought I would have to carry her out. And up came that head one more time and rolled over and looked at us, those dark, steely eyes staring right at us, and he shoved it again to the bottom of the pot. He fished around and came up with the lower leg bone with the foot and the toes attached and plopped that into my bowl with the feet hanging off the side. And I looked at my wife, and we were both a little green around the gills. And we went over at a little table, sat at the back of this bench, minding our own business, wondering how in the world we're going to do this. First time, you know. And we sat there staring at the fingers hanging off the side of the bowl, little skinny arm, not much flesh on it. And we looked up, and we saw him coming. You see, in their culture, the head is reserved for the hunter. That's the most prized possession. And there he came. Carrying that bowl of soup, broth was splashing out the sides. You kept the hole from rocking back and forth. And he came and sat right across from my wife. She ducked her head. She was gnawing on that arm bone the best she could, struggling with it. She glanced up and saw him holding that thing like a big old piece of watermelon, ripping skin loose and around the cheeks and around the lips with a grin from ear to ear. And that was our first experience, but not our last, with monkey stew. And will you gentlemen help me? Would you mind holding that balloon? I hope you have insurance. Yeah, hold it by the long end of the stick. They're kind of hold it away from you. And that'd be all right. The balloon is a very fast weapon, very quick, and very silent. So animals really don't even know they're being shot. There you go.
Straight out.
All right there? You're a good sport. Thank you. And they said Susanna looked out the doorway of her hut that day and saw her husband coming. He had his blowgun in his hand. To his back was strapped a huge basket. She could see that there was some kind of red meat wrapped in a banana leaf, a little blood dripping out the bottom, and he headed right for her doorway. She was ecstatic. At long last, he's bringing meat for the children and myself. My kids haven't had meat for a long time. And she was absolutely beside herself as he came closer to the doorway. And she wanted to rush out and greet him, but that would not be cultural, so she waited. And as he approached the doorway, her heart was racing with joy. And at the last moment, he turned and went to the other wife's hut, depositing the entire animal. Susanna was devastated. Her world was upside down. She was so tired. She went to the wall of her hut and extracted that machete and ran outside to the trail that took her to the garden area. And in that moment of desperation and depression, she dug up that barbasco root and chewed a raw portion of it. And now they found her in a deep coma, her life slowly ebbing away. It was one of those dark nights, you know. It had been a rough day in the clinic. I had many patients. The church was doing well, and now this. Why? I couldn't come to terms with it that night. I was struggling with the cultural areas of the tribal belief. I was desperate that night. I was so tired. I could feel a light, damp breeze floating through the screen window. My wife had followed me to the clinic that night, curious as to who they brought on that stretcher. When she saw that it was Susanna, she fled to her place of prayer beside her bed at the house, and she pleaded with God to please give Susanna another chance. I had done everything possible for Susanna that night. Her breathing was so shallow. Her skin so pale. Her eyes sunk in. I was waiting for the end to come. I felt so alone, and behind me I could hear the women. I could hear the low murmur of them getting ready to give the death cry. I could see her husband off to the side, shifting from one foot to the other because he knew that if she died, her uncles and family members who were not Christian would make him pay. In revenge, he would lose his life for sure. He knew that. And I bowed my head that night, and I prayed. I said, Lord, I've done everything I can for Susanna. There's nothing else. I don't understand this. She's just a wonderful Christian mother, and now this. It doesn't make sense to me. And I said, Lord, if you don't touch her, she's not going to make it. There's nothing else I can do. And I opened my eyes that night, and I looked on Susanna, and those sunken eyes and the pallor skin, And I saw just a slight fluttering of the eyelids. And then there was a little quivering of the lips. And a few incoherent words tumbled out. And I thought to myself, is this that moment just before death? I've been around it so many times. And I was prepared, I was bracing myself for the cry, the death cry that would echo out across the night air. And then Susanna spoke a few coherent words. And immediately her husband came to her side with a gourd full of water, and he put that water to those dry, burned, parched lips. You see, barbasco poisoning, it burns the entire intestinal tract. It's an agonizing, terrible death. And she began to drink of that life-giving liquid. And then she spoke a few more words, and the women came along and they cradled her in their arms in a half-sitting position. And Susanna opened her eyes and came out of that deep coma. And I'm sitting in our little clinic there, miles from anywhere, and I see yet another miracle. I said, thank you, Lord, for bringing Susanna out of this coma. And about that time, the door of the clinic opened, and in came Addie, and her first question was, how's Susanna? Addie, you're not going to believe it, but look, she's awake, she's out of the coma, she's going to make it. And we had a prayer of thanksgiving that night. And sorrow turned to joy. And her husband was so terrified, the next day, he sent his second wife, who had no children, back to her family and never lived with her again. And time went on. We rejoiced. Years went by. We moved our mission station from that place upriver 25 miles to another more centric area. And then I will never forget it. You see, the story into there would be a good story. But in Nazarene missions, there's always the rest of the story. Yes. Because you subscribe to Faith Promise, because you give, because you sponsor children like that on the screen we saw. And let me tell you, that is one of the best things you can do. Some of our pastors' kids in the Amazon are on that child sponsorship program, and it's their only means of continuing their education. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for filling alabaster boxes. We have bought property with alabaster money. My box is so full I can't get any more in it. I believe in alabaster. My wife has her box filled too. We're waiting. This month is alabaster month. Thank you for Compassion Ministry, for those little boxes we fill, crisis care kits they call them. All of this makes it happen out on the field. Thank you for Link's program. You've been so kind to us this last couple of years. We're grateful. Thank you for that. Oh, the rest of the story. I quit. It was a Monday morning. I'll never forget it as long as I draw breath. I was on the way to the clinic when the director of the Bible Institute, where we taught men and women to prepare for ministry, he came to me and he said, Doctor, he said, could you teach the first class this morning? It's the new students. I said, oh, I'll be happy to. So I went into this classroom and I saw all of these new young men and women from different parts of the tribe. Some had come from 2 or 3 days away to begin their 3-year program for ministry. And I didn't know hardly any of them. They'd come from far away places. So I asked them, I said, would you please stand, give me your name and tell me where you're from. And one by one they did, and I was so overjoyed that morning as I listened to them and the village where they came from. I didn't even know we had a church in that village. And now someone preparing for ministry, thank you, Lord. And then a nice-looking young man of about 21 over here stood to his feet. I said, your name, please. He said, my name is Demetrio. Demetrio, tell me, where are you from? He says, I'm just downriver. I'm from the village of Cheaping. Cheaping? We lived 16 years on the backside of that village. I knew everybody in Cheaping. Cheaping was formed by 3 or 4 men that had extended families. So I asked him, I said, what family are you from? He says, I'm from the Catan family. Catan? Wow. I said, your granddad was one of my first converts, old man Catan. He said, you know my granddad? I said, yes. He was an incredible Christian. But your granddad, he had a couple of wives before he got saved, and he had many children, many sons. Of which of these sons are you a son? He said, well, my dad, his name is Walter Catan. Walter Catan is your dad? He said, you know my dad? I know your dad. I said, how is your dad? I haven't seen him for a long time. He said, you haven't heard? I said, no. He said, my dad got saved some time back, and they've elected him to the church board of the village. Your dad is on the church board in Chiefy, Walter Catan? He said, yes, that's the reason I'm here studying in the Bible school. Wow. And how's your mom, Susanna? Oh, he said, my mom, she's the pillar of the church. My mom's faithful today as long. She raised me in the church. She took me to the church all my young life. And I stood in the classroom that day and I said, thank you, Lord, for Nazarene missions. And he finished his 3-year program. I saw him not too long ago. Addie and I were in the village a couple of years back, and we saw Susanna. We hadn't seen her for ages. She came running to us, clung to us. And I'm glad God's given me the opportunity to be a Nazarene missionaries. Thank you for supporting missions. May God bless you as you contemplate this morning your faith promise. Because, friends, it's changing the world. It changed ours. There are now over 200 churches just among those indigenous people. Did you know Peru has nearly 1,000 churches of the Nazarene? Did you know that in Peru there are nearly 100,000 Nazarenes? To God be the glory, and to you the thanks.
So, how are we going to do the faith promise? You're just going to leave it over there? All right. And I know I don't want to keep all of you. I don't know about you, but I'm starving. I'll tell you, you should have seen the look on my wife's face back there when you were going through that. She turned HKs. But thank you very much for coming and speaking to us. And we've enjoyed it. Would you stand with me? Dear Lord, we thank you for the work that our church does throughout the world. We thank you for the service that this couple has done for so many years and what they've given to you. Lord, we know that you are at work around the world bringing people to you. And it's our job to be the hands and feet, but we know that your Holy Spirit goes out before us. Lord, we thank you for the love that it takes to do this kind of work and to support this kind of work. And just ask you to help us know what we should give and how we should give, all of those things. Lord, you pour out your Spirit on us and give us assurances of what you promised for us. We thank you and we praise you for all that you're going to do. In Jesus' name.